Well, thank you both very much for your testimony. Dr. Polyakova, I was really struck by your talking about the increased militarization of Russian society, because I have continued to believe that one of the most important reasons to support Ukraine is because it sends a very strong message to not just our allies and partners that we would be there for them, but to our adversaries who threaten the United States. And it was pointed out to me recently that one of the other really important aspects of that is that we do not want to be in a position 5 or 10 years down the road where Russia actually is able to absorb Ukraine and has access to all of the increased buildup that Ukraine has done and their expertise, technology, innovation to go against NATO and our other allies and partners. Can you talk about that and how you calibrate that concern against other issues with respect to Russia?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Senator Shaheen. It is true that the militarization of Russian society is not new, but it has accelerated significantly since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And what I mean by that is that there is consistent reporting that, for example, children as young as kindergarten age are receiving military drill education. And this is continues on through the school ages and, of course, up to the years of military service. And this is deeply, deeply concerning for a variety of reasons, as you can imagine. That being said, to your point about what would be the consequences if Russia was able to eventually completely take over Ukraine, the first consequence is how expensive it would be for NATO to then have a Ukraine that is completely occupied and controlled together with Belarus, together with Russia's positions in Kaliningrad as well, to defend and deter against that. That's going to cost us a lot more than what we're already spending and what our European allies are spending on Ukraine. So there's a real expense there, aside from the security threat. I think broadly speaking, it's important to remember that Russia is a strategic and direct threat to the United States, not just our allies in Ukraine. It seeks to undermine as a core objective the United States as its position as a global leader. That is what the war in Ukraine is at the end of the day about. It is not about some territory in the Donetsk region. It's not about Crimea. It's about deposing the United States as the leader of the free world. And that is the key objective, and that is why Russia has partnerships with China and others.
And do you think this administration and this president recognize that?
I think there are certainly members of the administration who do recognize that. Personally, I would like to see that message be very, very clear to our allies at the summit. I think the one question that a lot of our European allies have is, are we aligned on the threat perception between all the NATO partners, not just the United States? Do we have the same understanding of the threat that Russia represents? And I think if we can get some movement in that at the summit, that would be very significant.
Mr. Rao, can you answer that question as well?
Well, I would note that American weapons continue to transit via Poland into Ukraine. There is a sanctions regime in place, even if we can quibble about the size and scope of it, as well as sanctions enforcement. And the United States is a member of NATO. Just 2 weeks ago, NATO held a defense ministerial, on the sidelines of which the Ukraine NATO Council met, as well as the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. 20 billion euros in new security assistance has been pledged this year. So while the U.S. is adopting this mediating role, this form of neutrality almost between Ukraine and Russia, it's neutral bending towards Ukraine, I would say. And go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. Are either of you surprised that Russia has not come to the aid of Iran in the current conflict with Israel, that they're not providing the weapons, or at least news reports are that they're not providing the weapons that Iran has requested?
I do think it was notable that in the phone call the president held with President Putin, there was a heavy section on Iran, and the president even said explicitly in his own readout that they focused very little on Ukraine. So I do think that President Putin is trying to vector the Americans against the Israelis and to try to shut down the war so that the Iranians can recover. In that sense, I think he is carrying diplomatic water, the Russians are, for the Iranians. But I see no evidence of direct military transfers to date or anything of that nature.
Dr.
Just very
Polyakova.
briefly, I'm not surprised because Russia is not a reliable partner. And we saw this in Syria as well. They tried to protect Bashar al-Assad, but then when the fall of his regime came, the Russians were nowhere to be found. And I think that's the real message that I hope we can also convey across the world as the United States.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen.